Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I'm the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People Too, and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization, and here and sponsor of this podcast. So again, I appreciate Telehelping for allowing me the opportunity to talk to great people like Jason. How are you doing this morning, Jason?
I'm doing great, Cody. Thanks for having me on the pod.
No, Jason, super excited to have you on. Super excited for the possibility that you may get invaded by your children while doing the podcast. That would be super funny. But if it happens, we are people too, which is it's in the title.
The way it goes. Yep.
Well, Jason, I like to start things off by telling our listeners, who is Jason? Who are we talking with this morning?
Sure. I'm Jason Harrier. I'm the one of the founders and the general counsel of a company called IP Copilot. But before I founded the company, just a traditional patent attorney. I grew up in Pittsburgh, currently live in Arlington, Virginia. I took the normal path from law school to the patent office, which a lot of folks do. Went to law firms. I was a partner at a small law firm for about 5 years. And then I became an in-house attorney. In-house is always kind of the dream when you're in a law firm billing hours and you're like, oh, the in-house folks don't have to bill by the hour anymore. And so that's always a dream for folks. And so I made the dream come true. I went in-house to Capital One and helped build a patent program there. After 4 years or so of that, I ended up at fintech called Plaid. And I was the first IP attorney that Plaid hired. And I did that for a few years before IP Copilot. I have 2 little girls who you might run in here asking for snacks. They're off school today. And so I have a little 6-year-old named Charlotte, 10-year-old named Chelsea. They're a lot of fun. I have a big white Samoyed named Blitzen after the reindeer. He's over 14 years old, and so he's still in good health, but his back legs don't work so much. So my neighbors see me carrying the Samoyed up and down the steps all the time in the morning because he can't go up and down steps anymore. So that's what I do first thing in the morning is carry a Samoyed outside of the backyard. Couple interesting things I like to do on the side is I collect wristwatches, and so I got into that when I worked at the patent office. My office mate and I just started looking at a website called Time Zone, which is still around, but it was like pre-forums and pre-blogs. It was a long time ago. So we started collecting wristwatches. So I do that on the side. And I also collect bourbon. I did, when I was at Capital One, I did a program at the University of Louisville's business school. They have 2 business school specialties there, accounting and distilled spirits. And so I did the online distilled spirits. They spun it out into a business certificate. And so I call it Bourbon School. And so it was one of my favorite things I've ever done is I went to Bourbon School. And it wasn't about making it. It was about sustainability, marketing, supply chain. Very interesting. And it was cool because you had the business school professors and somebody from what they call the industry. So someone from Buffalo Trace or somebody from Maker's Mark. And they were actually there to help teach the class along with the faculty. And so that was a really cool experience just to learn behind the scenes of the bourbon industry. And so I collect it. I actually don't drink it that often, but that means I end up accumulating like tons of bottles.
Yeah, I've gotten so many bottles as gifts now that I've started re-gifting bottles.
Yeah.
More like when I get one, I'm like, oh, this is great. Well, unless it's like a unique bottle, I will keep that. Other than that, I do re-gift them now because I only have so much shelf space.
Me too. I mean, I have nowhere to put it. And so someone comes with our county in Arlington gives away free trees. And last year I signed up for a free tree and the 2 guys that came over to put it in, super hot day. They had to like carve out a stump that was, buried underground. They were working their tails off. And so I said, you guys like bourbon? It's like, I have a couple nice bottles. It was actually rye. It was Whistle Pig, but I'm just giving it away to anybody I can. Cause I have a lifetime supply essentially.
That's great. That's how I feel about tequila. So I own some tequila land in Mexico, and we have a direct contract with a major distiller there. But yeah, we're just drowning in tequila, it feels like. And so
That's great. Tequila's that's like my summer spirit. And I love it. I also don't know a lot about it. So like it's something that's a rabbit hole that I haven't gone down because it's deep. I know some
yeah.
folks know a lot about it. I'm sure you do. And it's an area that I haven't gone down the path yet because I know I'm that type of person way down the rabbit hole on it.
Well, I started studying tequila very early in life at the university. So, first, when I joined the Marine Corps, and so no, Jason, that's great, and I love your path and what you've been doing with the IPs. I actually filed my first patent in my teens. And
Wow,
so,
what was it on?
It was on a gray water recycling system. It was in the middle of a major drought in the Carolinas back in 2003, 2005, like very early. And I sat there, I was like, 12, 13 years old. I was like, how much water do we waste waiting for the water to heat up? Right. And I'm like sitting here, I'm just watching this water come out of the faucet into the drain, down the drain. And we're sitting there talking about not being able to water our lawns. Right. And so with the help of who I lived with, my grandmother, her boyfriend of a gazillion years, right? Never married, but I call him boyfriend. He was an NASA Boeing engineer, and he's like, oh, we can do this. We just need like a bifoil system to, be programmed for a certain temperature, and then it flips a valve and then reroutes it back to the faucet. And so it was as easy as unplugging your shower nozzle and plugging it in and replug it in, and it would just go into a container. And then you'd use the water for, if you want to be the person who fills up your toilet with it, sure. We were using it for like watering plants inside the house. And so never really did anything with it, but it was cool, right? Yeah. It was cool to do that process as a kid. I used to sleep at night with a notebook next to me, like, oh man, wow, that's a great idea. I'm going to write this down.
That's amazing. My oldest daughter, she wants to be an inventor when she grows up. And I've actually taken her to IP conferences, and she's not that interested in learning about the ins and outs of IP law. She's like, Dad, that's important. But she does like quite a bit. Like you're saying, she has a little invention notebook, and she's trying to come up with a solar powered car that uses steam, and she wants to take on Tesla. So
it's great. I think that whether you're an inventor or an entrepreneur, like oftentimes the single difference between someone with an idea and with a product, a company, or a task is action. It's just execution. Like oftentimes people come up like, oh, that's a great idea. They never do anything with it. Right. I'm guilty of having great ideas that I'm like, oh, that's stupid. And then I'm watching it a couple of years later. I'm like, oh man. So
that's how you know it's a great idea, when someone else has either already done it or they do it like in 2 years and you didn't do it. I was just I took my daughter yesterday to a lunch at a pizza place. And when I was in college, I came up with this idea for pizza seasoning where every time we got pizza, we would put like Parmesan cheese, we would put oregano, a little black pepper, crushed red pepper, garlic, salt, and all that stuff. And I was like, everyone's just putting the same 5 things on their pizza all the time. Why don't we just put it all together? So I actually made some and like gave it away to family and friends. So yesterday at this pizza place, they lined up like 5 things like next to us. And I said, you know what? I should have done the pizza seasoning idea. What would you think of this if you had that rather than all these 5 things? And they loved it yesterday at the pizza place. And so they still haven't come up with it. It's been a long time and no one's done it yet. So I should.
Well, it's just, oftentimes like, well, I think long before, LinkedIn was a thing, I had this thing where I believed that we could match investors with like, co-founders through like a dating app. Right. And I was like, oh man, I went on with another project, started another company. And I was like, I don't have to, you have to pick, right? As an inventor or an entrepreneur, you have to pick. And then you're sitting there like, oh, hey, that was a really good idea. But, we do, my wife limits my projects. I'm only allowed to have 5 active projects at one time. And so I have to have a primary, which is telehelping, right? And, but I do have 4 other ones who it's either consulting because I love consulting, or other hustles or projects that I work on. But oftentimes entrepreneurs They like their brain needs to be that busy.
Yeah, for sure. It's always it's a struggle choosing, and it's like focus is the thing. Saying no is the number one thing that I always think of. Like you have to say no to succeed in the things that you're focusing on. So like limiting it to 5, you're saying no to the other 10, and it lets you at least, like you said, execution's everything. And if you're doing 10 at once, you can't execute well at all 10. So like limiting it is the number one factor for success in my mind.
No, that's great. And so, how did you get into patent law? I think about all the things. I used to want to be a lawyer, and then my uncle so sagely said, "Don't become a lawyer; just hire a lawyer." Right? Yeah. And just don't do that. And so, but now you're an entrepreneur. I don't see a lot of owning your own legal practice is definitely entrepreneur, but you seem to be like an entrepreneur person, right? How does a lawyer, a guy who goes to practice patent law, which is very exciting, right? How does that person be you?
Yeah, when I was in college, I did computer science, and that was back during the .com bubble. I started college in '99, and so it was a great time that pets.com was lighting it up, and it was a great time to do computer science. But during my 4 years, the .com bubble burst. And there wasn't like a particular area of computer science that was really intriguing to me. A lot of folks that I was in classwork with wanted to do their master's or PhD in like these very specific areas that they were interested in. I didn't have one like that. I was very good at it, at coding and all my labs and building things, but I didn't want to like focus on studying any particular area. And so my wife now, girlfriend back then, was really interested in going to law school. And so she calls me Elle Woods because I woke up one day and I said, you know what, I'm just going to go to law school. I didn't want to go like sit in a cubicle and engineer right away. And I didn't know what a patent was. I just had a hunch that like a computer company would want a lawyer who knew a lot about computers. That would be useful.
Fair. Yeah.
So I woke up one day, applied to a bunch of law schools, got into Duquesne and in Pittsburgh, which is a school that's like well respected within Pittsburgh, and so I decided to go there. And so I still didn't know what a patent was. And so my first day of law school, our torts professor did an icebreaker, and I was intimidated because most people, there's 150 people in the class, and most of them had dreamed their whole life, or at least the last 4 years, about going to law school. They knew what type of lawyer they wanted to be. They had written lots of papers. And it's very like you hear about law school and it seems very competitive. Yeah. And so you're intimidated. And so we went around the room. And when she got to me, I said, what's your major, undergrad? And I said, computer science. She said, oh, you must be doing patent law. And I said, I'm not sure what that is. Like, why would you say that? And she says, well, to do patent law, you have to have a hard science background and go to law school. And by the end of that class, there was only 3 people in the class that had the qualifications to do this thing that I just heard about. And I said, oh, I'm just going to do that. There's 147 people. I just shook off my list of competitors if I do the thing that they would have to go back to undergrad to do.
Yeah.
I said, I don't really know what this is, but that's what I'm going to do. And so I did it. And it actually, I'm the type of person, I learned this like metaphor at Capital One, actually. Our general counsel brought it up on the call. And there's people who are hummingbirds who like to learn a little bit. And at the end of the day, like they learn enough and then they go on to the next thing. And then there's woodpeckers that like to drill down and just learn everything you can learn about a particular topic. And I'm definitely a hummingbird. Like I like to learn. I'm an early adopter. I love the latest technology. I want to learn about it. And then as soon as I learn enough about it, then I'm satisfied and just move on to the next thing and drop it like a rock. And that's just the way that I am.
I love that.
And it turns out that that's exactly what your job is as a patent attorney, is you meet with inventors, at least on the prosecution side where you're drafting the patents. You meet with inventors who came up with cool stuff. You learn enough about it to write a good patent application. You file the patent application, and then you meet the next group of inventors with the next idea. And you learn enough about that to do a patent application. And so not only is it always something new, because they're by definition inventions, they haven't existed before, but you're learning new things constantly, but then you're always learning a new thing shortly thereafter. So every week it's a new thing. So that's kept my interest for all this time. Whereas if I had just drilled down into like employment law, I was just doing the same thing and getting into the nuances of the case law for employment law, I think I would have been bored, in a number of years.
No, I mean, I'm very much a hummingbird as well. One of my dear friends and I, we trade equities together, and my mentality is, I've practiced various disciplines of equities, and I know a wide variety of equities, options, tactics, and methodologies to trade. I know enough to be successful. I'm successful every day at it. Not today, but today wasn't a good day for me, but it was a good week. And so, but he drills down to us like, hey, you got to do this, this webinar this week and this class this week. And I'm like, absolutely not. I work 80 hours this week. I want to do nothing on Saturday except something that doesn't have to do with a computer, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to be away from my computer. And so, but he is just a drill person. And he is an former ER physician, which is a rabbit hole and specialty. And so like that is his, fellowship experience. And me, I've always been like a light, entrepreneur, like get knee deep, right? Knee deep's good. You can wait in the water. Like what's next? And so, I love that. And then I also love that your experience in, law school, because, I am awaiting a decision any day now for a graduate program at Harvard. And, I was talking to my wife last night. She's like, are you excited? I'm like, the decision. I'm like, I try not to get excited, because then you get excited and you get your hopes up, you don't get in. But like, I was like, I told her, like, but what if I do get in? I'm like, I'm going to feel so out of place. I told her I would sit amongst my peers at the time. And, some of these people who've wanted to do this their entire life, right? I've been like a serial entrepreneur, right? My entire life, and, military background, like no point that I think, oh, I want to go attend Harvard. It was just an opportunity that came out. And so I would feel very out of place. And, oftentimes in all the movies, books, and stories we hear in life, those out of place people are oftentimes the unique success story. And so, those who like, well, how did I get into this in the first place? Those are the ones who do well at it.
Yeah, diving into the unexpected, being the odd one out, brings a different perspective to the same coursework or the same program. And so in my experience, the other thing, like at law school, there's a lot of folks that did like the night program, and they were usually like, most of the class, like say 140 were fresh out of college. And there would be 10 who had worked for 10 years and decided to go to law school. So they were a little bit older, had some real world experience, and across the board, they were like the top of the class. They just had like a different set of experience and maybe a different work ethic, and they came at things differently analytically than the young kids right out of school who were like very good at memorizing a bunch of stuff and spinning it back onto tests. But law school is more about analyzing things and coming up with reasoning. And I felt that the folks who were just out there and had, a different set of experience than the rest of them, they definitely excelled.
That would definitely fall into that category. I've lived the best part of the past 5 years in Mexico, and because of telehelping, I sold a previous company, and I retained telehelping was made during that little company as a support piece for that company, and we retained it after the acquisition, and it was just doing its own thing. But it started growing, and I was like, man, I'm really tired of going through customs so many times a month because I keep getting randomly flagged, right? So I was like, I'm like, let's just move back to Guadalajara, like where my wife was from originally. She immigrated to the States. And so living there, I am working with a multinational organization because we support clients from, San Diego to Miami to Ontario to Tel Aviv, right? And so we have clients all over the world. But we support only with Mexico-based people, and it really gave me a greater understanding of the complexities of international relationships, but also a love for Latin America, and so and its relation with Daddy US, right? And this mentality is sometimes that I feel like there needs to be better people in place that care about both sides than there are currently. Because I feel like right now, especially right now, it's just like the defensive line going against the offensive line, and we're trying to get that 1 yard from each other at a time. And I just feel like there's a better way of doing it. And so that's what I was like, you know what, I think I'm like, what if I could get in international politics, and whether it's the ambassador route or something like that? I feel like I could do better for Mexico as someone who speaks Spanish, who's sympathetic more towards Mexico. My kids are Mexican; they're primary Spanish speakers, all of them.
Oh, that's great. That's cool.
And so my wife immigrated to the States. So I was like, I feel like I'm in a really good spot to like participate in Trump's America in Mexico's favor.
Yeah. That's
Right, I get Trojan horse the Trump's America. So and this thing would be really good. And I'm just like, okay, well, my company basically runs itself, and entrepreneurs after like 5 years, I don't know about you, but I was like, great, this is nice, but I wanted to keep doing this thing and keep growing because you pay me. but also, you want something fresh and exciting, and I want to see my impact in the world. And I imagine you get to see that when you get to work with people who are trying to change the way we do a task with an invention or a patent of a process or something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most rewarding part of being a patent attorney, is helping innovators become inventors. Most of the folks you work with at a law firm, you'll do calls like with the inventors to get information about their disclosures and their inventions, so you can draft the patent. And most of those folks are previous inventors. At Capital One, that was my first in-house job, and they had a patent program for many years, but it wasn't significant, and they decided that they wanted to do something more significant. And so when I was there, it was all first-time inventors, essentially. Maybe like 3 or 4 had done it before, but we had thousands of first-time inventors that you're working with, and that was just so rewarding, because they're folks who are doing jobs. They're excellent at what they do. They're among the best at what they do, and they're coming up with like new things in the world every day, and breaking down the barrier between their thinking that a patent has to be something you can pitch on the Shark Tank to incremental improvements that you're coming up with. You're working on hard challenges. You're very good at what you do, and you're making small changes that make the world better every day, and helping them turn those into inventions and then get recognized for it as patents is just immensely rewarding. And that's largely, we did like patent bonuses where you get a small bonus if you filed a patent. Some folk, that's what got them in the door, but at the end of the day, across the board, it was really the recognition and being an inventor on a patent. It was the cool thing that kept folks coming back. So you're right, like it's using your experience to like help the world out in that way, and usher those things into the world is a cool thing to do.
No, that's great. And Jason, you mentioned something before we started recording that I think is very relevant to the time period. Is your wife works for the government?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of crazy things going on right now with Doge, things like that, and you live in Arlington, which is basically DC. And so how's the environment in that part of the country with all that's going on, because so many of the people there are government employees? How's that with the family side of things?
It's really difficult. And in this area, we're in quite the bubble. I mean, there's a vast number of folks here. I'd say the majority or either working for the federal government in some way, or they're supporting the federal government if they're in lobbying or in law firms. There's an immense amount of that here. And so we're in this bubble where, I think across the country, it's probably a 60-70% approval rating of what Doge is doing. But here it's 5%. It's important to cut the fraud, the waste, the abuse. But what they're doing at the federal government, the budget, someone just told me this last week. I didn't know it, but the entire federal workforce budget is like 4% of the United States budget. So it's a very small piece of it. And the cuts and going back to the office, it's actually from the inside looking out. Doge has done a lot of things that cut programs that are ridiculous. And I think politicians for like decades have aimed to do the same thing. It's actually not that controversial to cut a lot of the silly stuff.
Yeah.
Every politician on both sides has promised to do it at one point or another. But the initial executive orders, the riffs, the 5-point email, what did you do last week?
Yeah.
Going back to the office has created one of the least efficient situations that, like, I don't think anybody in the government that I know of has done anything other than deal with these issues that keep popping up week after week, rather than what they were doing, 3 months ago. And so the dust will eventually settle, I think, but it's been quite tumultuous just from a working perspective. I know from I know so many federal employees that are just dealing with those issues all the time. A lot of them are lawyers that have to interpret the executive orders or determine when they took down Biden's executive orders, what to do, figure out like how should folks respond to this email. It seems simple, but there's a lot of repercussions for that. And so there's been a lot of work that's been created that isn't the work that they're necessarily meant to be doing on one hand. And then going back to the office has created a lot of inefficiencies too. I mean, it's my wife's getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning to get to the office, to sit in an office and do, waste an hour and a half in the morning, sometimes getting in and getting situated just to get home in time for dinner. And so it's actually not making, it's hard for me to believe that getting up early and burning it at both ends is making folks work more efficiently. So it's a tough time.
I think about that as well. I think about I've ran virtual organizations for some time now, right? Actually, 2019, I've been remote, right? For the greater, and I've had offices that I've gone to that I've owned and operated, but it's hard in the medical world to apply physical medical care if you don't have an office, right?
Yeah.
Those are exact, but I'm right there with you. In the event where you're going into an office to then work in a computer, right, is asinine, right? And so, I also see the other side of that, because at telehelping, we recently sold our call centers, which were a pain, right? Call centers are great, very lucrative. However, I found myself going once a week to every call center, right? And, it's so every 6 weeks I was rotating through all of them, and that's a lot of work. But on the other side, that most of our companies remote, which is great, right? It means I can hire anyone in Mexico who's going to support someone internationally in the whole world, right? And my staff itself there are challenges with that, right? Because you will get people, undoubtedly, who want to take advantage of that, right? And so, we have very defined policies at the company, right? Where what work hours mean, things like that. But also at the same time, I get off with you, and I'm going to go check why my son's screaming from across the house and why I hear him echoing. Like, what's that? Like, what's going on over there, right? But it is. I think there's a problem with the lack of respect towards humans for me with the back of office things. Like, is a person going to be more productive because now they're wasting 3 hours of their day getting somewhere, right? And I've done it. I used to commute across LA every day for an hour and a half, 2 hours, right? I spent 4 to 5 hours on the 405, right? And so it's crazy, because what does that do to people? Like, so you're going to calculate how many days a week we spend in a car going somewhere to do what we could have done at that computer, right?
Yeah, 100%. The traffic here has picked up over the last few weeks. Like, you can barely go anywhere in the middle of the day. In the morning, especially all the way to like 10 or 11, forget about it. Like, the traffic, and it's just people sitting in their cars, not doing anything in the world productive. And, my wife, very, very strict. Like, she would work her exact hours every single day, the entire pandemic. Not one time did she like go for a walk in the middle of the day, which is a totally healthy thing that you should do, but didn't want to get off of her computer. So did everything. She was as productive as you could be, did everything. My friends at the patent office, they have a production system. And it doesn't matter where you're working or how much you have to do so many things every bi-week. And if you don't do that, then there's repercussions for that. So they're going to hit their production requirements no matter where you work. And they were actually one of the patent offices, interesting, because I started there in 2006 and I worked there until 2007. And back then they had kicked off a hoteling program where you could work out of the office for some portion of time. And then they rapidly started expanding to satellite offices that would support remote employees, who they called were hoteling employees, around the satellite offices. And they were like one of the original, maybe the original telework, remote working government agencies, because they need people with technical expertise. And it's hard to find people with the technical expertise that's necessary. They can't just go get a very high paying engineering job in expensive areas like Washington, D.C. And so going to Detroit or Atlanta or Denver was really helpful to them, because they were able to get folks, pay them government salaries, which were competitive in those areas with what they could make as an engineer. And they could actually get the talent that they needed to do a good job, quality examination.
Yeah, that's also one thing the worst part about me is I can see both sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And it sometimes makes me a complicated person to have opinions on things, because
Yeah.
I can see both sides of things, right?
Yeah.
And I see like Mexico, for example, most of the time, like, we live in Puerto Vallarta, and, the issue is in Puerto Vallarta, which is a West Coast based beach city. There's a lot of Americans who live there now, a lot of expats who live there not on visas, right? They just live there. And so there they are making $10,000 a month, or, 200,000 pesos, right? Which is 200 times the base salary, right? And so then you have this huge spike of cost of living for the area, because now what used to cost, the equivalent to $100,000 is now costing 500 to $1 million, because they're changing the prices to get the Americans money. And that's happening across the United States in small towns in Texas and Iowa and Grand Rapids and all these places, because now you have people who are getting paid bay salary, DC salaries that are living places. And so I get it in certain respects, and I'm just really happy that that's not my problem, right? And, if it's my responsibility, I will have an opinion. But if I don't have to have an opinion, I will avoid having an opinion.
It's true. But there is another flip side of the coin. Like, I think that generally corporations who need to be successful, and the largest ones, are encouraging back to work. And I like the culture is hard to build virtually. I've worked in virtual law firms. I've worked on virtual teams pretty much since I left the patent office. And so my entire career has been virtual in some nature. And it's hard to build culture. It's hard to build relationships when you have that. And so I understand why companies want folks coming into offices. And I think there's a huge benefit to it. But there's, like you're saying, if you can do your job at a computer and you can save 2 or 3 hours a day in commuting and getting ready and going to the office, and when you have small kids, your lives can just be overall much better without that one piece. And I think that we've proven that it could work. So there's both sides to the issue as far as the efficiency, but also the quality of life that you can provide folks. But I understand why across the country there's such a huge approval rating for something like this, because there's so many folks who don't have a choice. It's not just physicians, it's folks that work at retail stores, folks that are doing, I just had plumbers at my house today. They couldn't not go to the office. My house is their office when I have a problem. And so there's a huge portion of the population that are maybe making less than these government employees sitting on computers. And I could see the perception of, they should go to the office too. And that's fair.
No, and it's a sensitive topic. I'm medically retired veteran, and so I hate and love the VA all at the same time, right? And I had a bad experience this week. I'm like, I can see why DOJ is firing all you people, right? And at the same time, though, I sit there and I'm like, wow, they're taking forever to review claims, right? They need more people. So I'm right there as well, but. Time tells all things. Good, bad, hard to tell. It's one of my favorite statements. We could look at a year from now and be like, wow, we're inching towards not having a deficit, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And we could also be sitting here like, well, that didn't work. So time tells all things.
That's true.
Yeah. So Jason, talk to me about your business. You're not just lawyering right now, right? You're not just doing the law thing with patent thing. What specifically does your organization do?
Yeah, thanks for asking. IP Copilot was conceived and built based from experience. Austin, my co-founder, was our top inventor at Capital One when I was there. And so we've both lived the experience of trying to find ideas within a large organization. How do you get folks that have other jobs to share ideas with you in a robust way so you can actually make decisions on whether it's worth a patent investment? Huge problem. And we experienced it there. We had an amazing outreach and education program. We had fun swag. We did all of the events. We did everything right. And we reached a lot of people. But when you have in a big organization, you typically have 1 to 1,000, 1 to 10,000 portfolio manager on the patent sides to innovators. And so how do you cover that much area? Just going out and doing lunch and learns and asking folks to share their ideas with you largely gets you the idea that they thought of in the car or while they were walking the dog that morning, not necessarily like the next great thing at your company in 6 months. They might not remember you. And so that's what we sought to solve. And so IP Copilot does discovery. And so we help inventors passively discover their inventions because we'll look at your JIRA for the engineers or project channels in your Slack. And we actually just take all of the innovations from around an organization and put them on a silver platter for the patent team every morning. So you come into work and you're not hoping that people come to you with ideas. You actually know the best ideas in your organization from the day before. And then once that happens, it's one click to submit the invention into the program. Whereas now, I think 100% across every company that's doing a patent program, they're using a 10 or 20-year-old form that nobody likes filling out. And it has 20 form fields. Why? You don't need that anymore. So with one click, it generates an invention disclosure. And then, so that's like the top of funnel that we do. And that's really our specialty. There's no one else doing that. Finding ideas in real time, helping inventors capture them. And then the other thing that we do, say that's extremely successful, and you have all of these new ideas, and I call it dark matter in organizations because you get some great ideas, but 95% of them are dark matter that you never hear about. And so say we collect all of the dark matter, then you have this huge pile of ideas, and how do you decide where to invest with your budget that did not grow year over year to make up for all the new ideas? And so what we do is we instantly curate it. And so we look in the prior art and we say, okay, is this new or not? Immediately. And then if it is new, here's exactly what's new about it. So when you make an investment, a patent is a $20,000 to $50,000 investment by a company, each one. And so we tell you immediately, here is what is valuable about this patent. And then you can say, okay, that is important to the business or not. And so we help that curation experience, which if you don't have an IP Copilot like tool, it's a manual prior art search. You're relying on your law firms to look for prior art. And if they find prior art, they don't get paid $10,000 to write the patent. So there's not an incentive for you not to file it. And so that actually is, and so we're streamlining that entire process, which is usually a year long. By the time you reach someone, they remember to come with you an idea. They give you a brief description of it. Then you have to go back and forth and get more detail. Then you do a prior art search. It's a year before you decide to file that. And the United States is first to file. And so your competitor might have beaten you. And so we're condensing all of that essentially into a day. You can now find innovations, know whether it's a great investment, and get that filing process started. It's all built from an inventor perspective. It's by inventors for inventors with a little bit of input from an IP council. And the reason for that is like they're the customers of a patent department. You want to make sure they have a great experience. Right now, and if an inventor at a company submits something, you're looking at 3 months before they hear back, and then maybe another 3 to 4 months before a patent is drafted. And if they only spend an hour during that entire process, reviewing a draft, sharing details with a lawyer, and it takes a year, 8 months to a year, they think it was a long, painful process. But if they spend the same hour and it's done in 3 months, they think it was great. Same time on their part, but all that back and forth, the nagging thing in their head, they remember every weekend, oh, I did file a patent. I wonder what's going on. That same hour seems painful if it's spread over a year as opposed to 3 months. And so we're helping create a better experience for them so that your customers come back and share more innovations with you.
No, that's incredible. And I've been through it. I've paid for the prior art searches. I've gone through and I've paid for it and it's come back, oh hey, by the way, someone's really done something too similar to this. So
Yeah.
and that happens. It's part of the process. But like you said, it's first to the trigger. As we say in the gunfighting world, it's the firstest with the mostest.
Yeah.
So,
That's the way that it is. Yeah. And so the other interesting thing is that companies now are just throwing it all at the wall and seeing what sticks. They're letting the patent office figure that out for them. And it's costing them millions of dollars a year. On average, the top 50 patent filers are spending $6 million a year on cases that they end up abandoning, which means it was a mistake to file at the outside. There's some companies that are spending 10, 11, 12 million dollars a year on patent filings that it should have never been filed. And that doesn't need to happen. And the side effect of that is that the patent office has almost a historic backlog of work to do right now. And it's a product of not knowing. The negotiation never starts between the companies because they're filing something that they don't know whether it's new or not. They file very broad claims. So the negotiation never starts. Then the patent office comes back with prior art. It's not necessarily on point, but it teaches the really broad thing that you just did. And then they spend 3 or 4 years going back and forth. They spend another $6 million a year on cases that are in like the third round of prosecution or longer. That should have never happened. If you can come to the table, come with a negotiated thing. This is what my invention is. I have a high degree of certainty that this is what I'm entitled to. And that can be done in a year once the patent office picks it up rather than 3 or 4. And so that's a big problem in the patent system, actually. If the patent office had the same tool on their side, a huge head start we provide, here's the prior art, here's the unique features. This is really what the applicant is entitled to. And the applicant did it as well. It can be a very short negotiation. And so we're hoping to impact the whole system on both ends eventually. Tools like ours or our tool, but I think AI has a huge opportunity in general to get folks to the negotiating table, which is really what you're doing at the patent office. You say, this is my invention. This is what I think I'm entitled to. They always come back, for the most part, and say, well, we think you're entitled to something a little narrower than that. Let's negotiate. And so if you start a negotiation at $100 million and $1, it takes a long time to get to the middle. And what we're trying to do is get people say, like, I think I'm entitled to $57. And they say, we think you're entitled to $50. And start there, and you'll get to a solution.
Much closer.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And so who's your client? Who's your particular avatar that would seek to use this tool?
We focus on enterprises for the most part because our bread and butter is that discovery process. That's where the inventors are. That is so valuable. That's something that doesn't exist today outside of a manual process of lunch and learns, manual outreach, trying to get invited to meetings for products. And so that's something that doesn't exist today. It's extremely valuable for companies. But we also have a law firm product as well, where if your clients are not using IP Copilot already, you can just take the disclosures and inventions from your clients, drag and drop them, and we give you that same head start and analysis. And so that is useful for law firms that want to get a head start on the drafting process. Everyone talks about like the price of eggs. No one talks about the price of patent applications, which has stayed the same for 20 years. And so the billable rates are going up and up and up. The real estate for law firms up and up and up. Everything is up and up and up. Patent applications flat or even down over 20 years. So they're underwater, and we're helping them get above water and focus on the right things and get drafting sooner. The one thing that we don't do for law firms is draft the patents for them. Every tool in our space, other than us, there's a lot of new, let's apply AI to patent companies out there. A lot of them are trying to do patent drafting, but none of them are patent attorneys. And so it's much harder than you think. And AI just isn't there yet to do it. And I know from many years of practice that one of the hardest things a business can do is try and convince a lot of patent attorneys to do their job differently. A lot of them are the woodpeckers we talked about earlier. They don't want to change the way that they're doing things. They just want to get patent applications drafted the way they always have. And so they're not going to, you might convince one attorney at a law firm to change the workbench that they're working on, to learn how a new tool to use AI to draft a patent. But good luck getting like the next 5. It's not going to happen. And so what we do is we give you a head start. We give you the analysis. We give you all of these golden nuggets of information that can give you a more strategic patent. And then we let you use your own workbench. And that way it scales across the way people do things. And so that's our thesis. And that works quite well. So I say that because we have the law firm side as well. It's been really good for us.
Well, it's interesting because I've worked in agriculture tech, I've worked in healthcare tech, and all too often, I was on the inside. I came on the inside, was inundated, educated, and brought up in those particular verticals, and then provided, a tech change to what was going on. I have seen so many bodies on the side of the roads of these particular verticals where people from outside of them came here. Let me tell you how to do your job. All right. I'm going to tell you how to do it better. Listen to me, doctor. Listen to me, farmer. All right. I know what I'm doing. I'm from Silicon Valley. So, it just never works. And they will spend and they will sell that rhetoric to whoever the VC, whoever the investors are. They'll raise millions and millions of dollars, and then it'll be really great write-offs one day. So, so because it just doesn't go anywhere. Oftentimes, great innovation is waiting for someone who has that local expertise, who has that inside information, that patent lawyer, right? Who's done the process to also be kind of techie, right? Or we oftentimes forget about, we always think Steve Jobs and Warren Buffett. We don't ever forget there's a duo there, right? There's a duo with look at that. Woo! There's a duo with these folks that they just didn't do it by themselves, right? They were definitely the innovator. They're the pushing it that direction. They were either the great understanding of the market in terms of how it applies to humans, but then there was Charlie. There's an analytics guy in the background, right? And so we forget about those folks, but that's who changes those industries. It's very rarely ever someone from outside of it.
100%. That's like Austin, my co-founder. He has almost 600 patents at this point, maybe over, mostly in AI. And our CTO, Jeremy, they run the same team at Capital One, has almost the same number of patents. Those two are in the top 5 AI inventors in the world. So they know what they're doing on AI. We're not using it IP Copilot. We're not just like wrapping our stuff around like ChatGPT. Like it's all homegrown AI. We don't send anything to ChatGPT or to Microsoft or whoever else is offering those tools. Almost every other company that I see is doing that in some fashion. We build everything internally. Huge advantage, because data security for these inventions is so important to companies. AI is a huge red flag for folks because they don't want models being trained on their data. They don't want their data being sent to these companies that don't necessarily know under what terms. So there's a lot of risk involved. And so we mitigate that quite a bit by having AI experts at the company building our own tech.
No, Jason, I love it. And, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This has been really great. I've had a lot of finance folks on, and we've like you fall into that tier of just really exciting. Like the thing, if law could be exciting, those folks in that law are in my podcast. This is like, all right, well, they do exist. So, but I appreciate you so much for taking your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, great rest of your weekend as well. And, I hope all things go well in the Doge wave. And, please let me know if you need anything, but I thank you again for your time today.
Brody, thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure.
Be well, Jason.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.